The Remarried Empress is back! For those unaware, The Remarried Empress is a Webtoon original series taking place in a world of kings, emperors, magic, and knights. We follow Empress Navier Ellie Trovi, the Empress of the Eastern Empire, alongside her husband, Emperor Sovieshu. While these two were in a marriage of convenience, they were still amicable as children, and had a solid relationship to build a royal marriage. Since for emperors and empresses, marriage for love isn't always possible. But everything was working out fine for these rulers, as both have been studying and learning what it meant to be a ruler since they were little. Both are well equipped to lead their empire. However, if everything was fine, we wouldn't have a Webtoon series. And we don't need to look far to realize this, as right in the title we notice something a little strange. The Remarried Empress? That's right, this series isn't about Navier and Sovieshu having a grand old marriage, but instead about Navier's divorce and eventual remarriage. This series is honestly so great, and with Season 2 coming out a couple weeks ago, now is a great time to get into this series. The characters are well written and humorous, the story has great themes about identity and defining yourself based on other people's opinions, and it's a great story with a great royal drama, and who doesn't want that? But today, we're not really looking at any of that. Instead, I wanted to take a look at our male leads. Emperor Sovieshu, husband to Empress Navier, and the prince/king of the Western Kingdom, Henry. Both of these characters are integral to not only the story, but the development that our main protagonist, Empress Navier, goes through. So today, we're comparing the rulers of the Eastern Empire and the Western Kingdom. How Emperor Sovieshu, and I'm gonna call him Prince Henry, because even though he is a king, he's introduced as a prince. Now, to the readers at home, it's clearly obvious that one is better than the other. We favor Prince Henry much more than Emperor Sovieshu. However, there is something important about this entire thing that is everyone's favorite thing: politics. Okay, well, royal politics, slightly more interesting. You see, we come into this series at a really divisive moment. Yeah, the first episode is literally the divorce, giving us a preview onto what will happen later in the series, but more importantly, the main story itself starts out with this girl, Rashta. Rashta is the catalyst to what happens throughout this entire series. We hop into the Remarried Empress with Empress Navier and Emperor Sovieshu being married for some time now, and running the Eastern Empire. However, a major problem arises: Rashta. We hear that on a hunting trip, Emperor Sovieshu found Rashta and brought her back to the palace. In any other series, this would have been a fantasy meet-cute. A random girl being saved by the emperor of a nation. However, this is the Remarried Empress. Nothing can be simple, especially since Emperor Sovieshu is already married. However, in this world, that's not necessarily a problem. Which brings us to the royal politics I mentioned before. As very early on in the series, we hear that Emperor Sovieshu takes Rashta to be his mistress. Now, the Remarried Empress takes place in a almost fantasy medieval times. Swords, knights, emperors, kingdoms, that jazz, you know? And we hear a lot about the concept of mistresses, an emperor's lover. That position comes with a certain prestige, I guess, but it's not synonymous with an empress, as an emperor can have a multitude of mistresses. And we kind of get to see this, as Empress Navier constantly throws shade at Rashta. How they're not equal, how she can just make friends with the next mistress. Now, mistresses are a little weird. A lot of characters, especially from other kingdoms, just view it as a way to legally cheat on your husband. But many other people see it as fine, acceptable, and weirdly inevitable. As even though Empress Navier was surprised that her husband took a mistress, it was more because it happened earlier than she thought it would, not that it happened in general. No, the biggest problem is what I mentioned before. Mistresses and empresses are not synonymous positions. However, not only does Rashta treat them pretty equally, but Emperor Sovieshu treats both women equally as well, if not treating Rashta better, and getting mad at Empress Navier for disliking Rashta, and can you blame her? Which is where our lovely Prince Henry gets introduced into the series. And with him comes another aspect of royal politics, that being information. Unlike our modern day, the kingdom and its citizens don't have easy access to information, only getting it from places like newspapers or rumors, which is where our initial opinion of our two male leads appear from. We don't get a ton of what people think about Emperor Sovieshu. It seems like people generally like him. Meanwhile, we get a ton of rumors about our other male lead, Prince Henry. Him being a Casanova, a playboy, being absolutely gorgeous, and a seedless watermelon, which is I think the funniest way to call someone infertile. We're presented with these two men in incredibly different ways. Sure, we do have a better view of these characters because we get to see them a little more personally than any rumor can spread. However, it's still a pretty clear idea on how these two men are viewed by the world. One is viewed as a leader, and the other as a playboy. However, these are just rumors, and we get to see these characters personally, in situations where people don't typically see them, like exchanging secret letters or talking about more delicate situations, which is where we see a lot of these characters shine, and where we see them for who they truly are. Let's talk about Emperor Sovieshu. Now, I mentioned him a few times, especially in this video, but I've never really done a deep dive into who he is. Emperor Sovieshu's first introduction is divorcing our female lead, so not the best introduction. However, it's not like it gets much better, as when Empress Navier asks him about Rashta, he doesn't bother explaining the situation, only asking her to stop asking about it, which is a weird stance to take. And even then, it gets worse, as he constantly blames Empress Navier for bad things that happened to Rashta, constantly questions her reasonable judgments and actions, all on a hunch that his wife is jealous of his mistress. But one major problem that I mentioned earlier, that Emperor Sovieshu treats both women the same. Now, I'm all for equality, but you can't treat your mistress, a runaway slave that you found on a hunting trip, the same as the Empress of the Eastern Empire, your partner for life in marriage and while ruling. These two should not be compared, yet Emperor Sovieshu does nothing but compare these two, loving his mistress more than his empress, which is incredibly bizarre to me. But I think it has to do with Emperor Sovieshu himself. Now, as an emperor, Sovieshu is likely used to a different kind of relationship. He probably likes the power, the control, the force he exerts over people. But that's kind of the biggest problem, at least to him, is that he can control everyone but Empress Navier. He loves that control. He practically lives off it. So the fact that he can't control someone frustrates him. And I think it's also why he loves Rashta so much. She wasn't someone who was raised in the culture of royals and empires. She has an innocence that Empress Navier doesn't. And what's more, Rashta's more responsive to how he shows love. Emperor Sovieshu showers both Rashta and Navier with gifts, gems, jewelries, even a pet bird. But maybe because Empress Navier doesn't care about these types of gifts, or maybe because she's a little desensitized to them, being the empress and all. But whatever the reason, Navier is a little more indifferent about it. Meanwhile, Rashta is overtly joyful even when receiving little things, like a pumpkin pie. Navier rarely needs or wants things. However, what she does usually need is emotional support. Something a lot more complicated and time-consuming. How many times has Empress Navier cried? In this series, a lot. Because of Emperor Sovieshu or Rashta or anything else. She doesn't care about a rare, one-of-a-kind ring or the fanciest jewels or dresses. All she wants is someone who is available. Someone who will reach out to her, not to provide her with things, but with support. And I think that's the biggest reason why Prince Henry's relationship with Empress Navier thrives so much. It's not solely because he's head over heels in love with her, but he's been a shoulder to cry on. to laugh with, to share secrets with, to share insecurities or problems and more. We see this crystal clearly. Whenever Prince Henry approaches Empress Navier in human form or bird form, don't ask, what is the first thing he does? Just hugs her. Whenever we see that she's been crying or been sad or needs someone, he gives her comfort. He opens up to her, provides her a place where she can be safe, a place where she doesn't have to worry about any drama or situations. Yes, their banter is adorable, and yes, he's absolutely gorgeous, as the webtoon puts it. And yeah, he doesn't start any problems, but most importantly, he provides someone she can be open with and honest with. Someone who won't blame her for being reasonable or having emotions. Emperor Sovieshu has a lot of problems, but the biggest one is his need for control. To take control of his kingdom, his mistress, his empress. So much so that whenever Empress Navier takes control, exposes his faults or his actions, he can't help but compare her to someone he can control. But that's not what a relationship is about. It's not about control. It's not about holding someone beneath you, making them do what you want them to do. But it's about being with someone together. Not being a boss or having control over someone, but having a partner, someone you can trust in and rely on, someone who will be there for you forever. But that's just what I think. What about you? What are your thoughts on these two men? Leave it in the comments below. But like always, thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you next week. Take care.